Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Knapp and Jim Geraghty.
And my name's Greg Knapp. I'm in for Greg Knapp, a Greg for a Greg. Not maybe the best Greg, but a Greg. But we are joined, as always, by the best Jim we could find, Jim Geraghty of National Review Online. And this is the Three Martini Lunch. Hey, Jim, we've got a good one to start today, okay? Because I love it when a liberal is hoisted on her own petard. And we're going to the Washington Free Beacon for this story. It's Senator Kirstin Gillibrand, Democrat, New York. She dismissed liberal MSNBC host Rachel Maddow's coverage of her prior conservative views, rejecting their characterization as talking points from the Republican Party. Now, you know, the reporting on Flip Ups is all true, but Jim, is Gillibrand using the Maddow as a stealth conservative copying Republicans' defense going to work with her left-wing base?
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, other Greg, great to have you with us. This is, probably a sign you've gone wildly off base when you're trying to argue that MSNBC is secretly trying to funnel conservative propaganda to its viewers. Look, there's no two ways about it. Kirstin Gillibrand, when she was elected to the House in 2006, up until she was appointed to Hillary's seat in the Senate to 2009, during that time she was, you pick your terms, centrist Democrat, conservative Democrat, indisputably. Very pro-gun, very tough on illegal immigration, totally opposed driver's license for illegal immigrants and all of that. Opposed gay marriage, which was which at that time, most Democrats were shifting in that position. It is worth noting, though, that she did change her position in 2009 when she was appointed to the Senate seat because Governor David Paterson told her she had to. So good stand on principle there. But this is how the New York Magazine does this great interview, very in-depth interview, but they ask, I think, a fair but tough question. You go on Maddow. Her intro to the interview is about how you were once fairly conservative on a range of issues, prominently on guns and immigration, and how you've shifted left on all of them. That theme has been pretty front and center in a lot of the early coverage. Did you expect that? And look, there's no good answer for this for Gillibrand other than to say, yeah, that's what my position was then. This is my position now. I've grown, blah, blah, blah. We all know this was an adjustment to a fairly conservative House district to representing New York State, which is overall much more liberal. Her response, it's certainly the talking points from the Republican Party. Right. It's what they're putting out there. Come on. You need a better spin than this.
When you were describing her evolution is the word they like to use, right? You were basically describing what Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama all went through on most of those issues. I mean, you listen to old Obama, Hillary, and Bill on immigration, and they almost sound like Trump. And then they slowly evolve as not really as their opinions change, but as the electorate changes. And it looks like, I don't know how you can look at it except for a race to the left. Mm-hmm. And Gillibrand doesn't want to be left behind, right?
Yeah. And it really might be one of the big themes of this primary cycle that you look at, 2000 era Cory Booker is the kind of guy a lot of conservatives would have liked. Very pro school choice, very frustrated with the Newark Democratic machine, took it on, a couple of years earlier. Joe Biden back in the 90s, tough on crime, let's get tough on criminals, death penalty, stuff like that. Almost every, Kamala Harris is probably going to have a lot of questions about how she handled crime and prosecutions back when she was a prosecutor DA in San Francisco. It's going to be probably for all of them. The best defense might be, well, yeah, I've shifted, but look at all these other folks and how they've shifted too. But Gillibrand's was really transparent and shameless. And I think that, the Maddow's a secret Republican plant is a sign you've reached the bottom of the barrel for excuses.
There you go. Martini 1 tastes pretty sweet. All right, Jim, here's the second one. Second martini might be a little bit hard to swallow. The Democrats at first came out against what Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was saying that certainly sounded anti-Jew. Some say anti-Semitic. It all depends, I guess, on how far you want to go. But they came out saying she shouldn't say that. They were going to, reprimand her or censure her. And now all of a sudden, a lot of Democrats on the left are coming out to defend her. They're blaming it, of course, on Trump. I mean, where does this go?
Yeah. Well, if you're saying, when you see the headline, Congresswoman Omar accused of anti-Semitic remarks, it doesn't mean the news is in reruns. It just means it keeps happening every couple of weeks. This is, by my count, the fourth or fifth time. Yes, this did just happen a few weeks ago. Sometimes she gets into more generic conspiracy theories when she said that someone had gotten to Lindsey Graham and, forcing him to change his positions with the Trump administration and things like that. But the controversy this week is right after she had, this consecutive remark in which she talked about, I want to talk about powerful lobbies that promote loyalties to other countries and things like that. The Democrats, here we go again. We need a resolution. And then all of a sudden there's this, they're backing away from it because there's been this pushback from a lot of her allies, a lot of these freshman Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There's kind of this argument of why are we eating our own, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is, I should give a little bit of credit. I understand Rahm Emanuel has a piece in the Atlantic today that's pretty blistering of this. There are some Democrats who are bothered by this, but it does clearly appear that the center of gravity is shifting. And you would think at some point, last time she did it, Chuck Schumer was not subtle about it. He said, this is use of an anti-Semitic stereotype. It's offensive and irresponsible. This kind of intolerance has no place in Congress or anywhere in American society. No one should invoke anti-Semitic tropes during policy disagreements. And then she just did it again 3 weeks later. So the question is, all right, Chuck, Nancy, what do you want to do about this? Clearly, these resolutions and issuing a statement saying don't do that, all it does is generate usually a very disingenuous sounding apology from Omar. Oh, I didn't know that would offend people. Oh, is saying Israel hypnotizes the world bad? Was that a big piece of traditional anti-Semitic propaganda? Oh, I had no idea. Oh, it's just a strange coincidence that my comments keep echoing this. My bad, let me, and then this happens again a couple of weeks ago. Republicans have kind of been saying, hey, at some point, don't you have to get yanked from your committee? Steve King got yanked from all his committees.
Exactly.
And the Democrats don't want to do that. And it's kind of interesting. Early in the week, it looked like Pelosi and Hoyer and the gang were like, all right, let's do this. Let's issue a resolution. Let's at least. And now even this, symbolic slap on the wrist consequence is being watered down. At this point, it appears it may not come to a vote to the House floor. Deeply disappointing if you think this sort of thing doesn't belong in Congress.
Which makes you ask this question, Jim. Is there a significant percentage of the Democrats in Congress who sympathize with what Congresswoman Omar is saying? It seems like there are more and more who tend to think it's okay to go to those anti-Semitic tropes and may even believe them. And if you happen to be a woman of color and a Muslim, and now you can say, well, hey, you're picking on me because I'm a woman of color and I'm a Muslim. Is there a segment that believes that?
I was going to say, it's worth noting in that bookstore remarks that generated all this. She said at one point, what I'm fearful of, because Rashida, she was talking about Rashida Tlaib, another member of Congress, and I are Muslim. And a lot of our Jewish colleagues, a lot of our constituents, a lot of our allies go to thinking that everything we say about Israel to be anti-Semitic because we are Muslim. So a little bit of that, victim card jujitsu. I'm the real victim here. Your objection to what I'm saying is driven by anti-Muslim bias. Look, of course, not all Muslims are anti-Semitic. When you make 4 or 5 comments in a row, we stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. And it's very clear that Congresswoman Omar is deeply concerned about the influence of AIPAC. She explicitly said it. She said so right directly. And here's the thing. There's kind of this argument of, I'm worried about foreign influence. There's some people trying to say, this is not just picking on the Jews. Well, other Greg, I don't hear much about the Arab American Institute being a problem and menace in American politics, the Armenian Association of America, Cuban American National Foundation. There are plenty of groups. And then, of course, that's not even getting into all the foreign governments that hire lobbying firms, the Aiken Gumps of the world. Occasionally you hear some mutterings about that, but it's always AIPAC that is always the centerpiece of this. And then, of course, I laid out in today's newsletter, is Israel above criticism? No. Are there areas where Israel makes decisions and we in the United States would have problems with? Sure. But when you constantly focus on Israel and you're not worried about 1 million Uyghurs in the Chinese, re-education camps, or the Turks' treatment of the Kurds, or the Rohingya in Myanmar, after a while, when you're constantly focusing on Israel, people start thinking, hey, wait a minute, maybe you're not an all-purpose human rights activist, maybe you just hate Jews. And that's what, I think it's a reasonable supposition in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, I do too. And Jim, what's really sad is that you described the United Nations Human Rights Panel.
Yeah, that United Nations is kind of the ultimate example of this.
Yeah.
Look, this is my to be sure. Look, I'm sure life stinks if you're a Palestinian. I'm sure there are a lot of protests. The Israelis do not handle that with kid gloves or light touch. The Israeli Defense Force does not mess around. This is a country that's been shaped by a lot of invasions. And let's face it, every couple of, it's on a regular basis. The neighbors are pledging to kill them all. The Palestinians, Hamas, Americans would have much warmer and fuzzier attitudes towards the Palestinian people. And they might be more sympathetic to the argument that they're being oppressed and that they're not being given anywhere near the kind of treatment that they deserve if they didn't have gangs like Hamas and Hezbollah running around, right? If you're firing rockets into Israel, Israel's going to shoot back. You'd think that'd be kind of well established, but
right.
Some years of history. For some reason, this is what happens. This is, it's one of those things where I don't want to say, oh, all's fair in love and war, and Israel's never done anything wrong. They have. Having said that, you look at their history, you look at their circumstances, it's somewhat more understandable. And it's somewhat also worth noting that every time somebody tries to sign a peace deal with Israel, they get shot. And it's one of those things people have said, where is the Palestinian Gandhi? Why isn't there a nonviolent leader to try to make the moral case for the Palestinian people? Well, the Arafats of the world shoot them. Hamas, Fatah, all these guys, they don't want a Martin Luther King type person coming along to advocate for the cause of the Palestinians, because that would be competition. And they very much like the power that they have. So, look, it's a long, ugly mess. It's been debated to death. But yeah, when people, when you constantly focus on Israel and never pay much attention to any other forms of oppression or human rights abuses around the world, people think you've just got it out for Israel. And it's not really driven by humanitarian concerns, but by some sort of deep-rooted animosity like anti-Semitism.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and possibly because I just finished my second martini and I'm a little tipsy. All right, here we go. Final martini, and this one might really push you over the edge. How about your 16-year-old who, you don't even trust to make decisions on what movies they go to, how late they stay out, maybe even who their boyfriend or girlfriend is? Well, Representative Pressley, Democrat, Massachusetts, is ready to give them the right to vote. 16 years old in federal elections, allowing minors to vote for Congress and for president. She's pushing the amendment. She's a freshman Congresswoman, or maybe I should say fresh woman now. I don't want to offend anyone. First to be introduced on the House floor, would be attached to H.R. 1, expected to be debated this week. So what do you say, Jim? You're ready for your 16-year-old to decide who helps govern the nation?
I was going to say, is this a major crisis facing the country? Are there a bunch of, brilliant 17-year-olds who are full of the answers to solve America's problems? And by golly, we have to draw the line somewhere. We have to draw the threshold. I understand they recently, a couple states have enacted it that if you're going to be 18 on election day or by election day, they'll allow you to register when you're 17. And that stuff makes sense. But we have to have a cutoff somewhere. 18 seems fine. It's the age where men register for the draft. You can't drink, and a lot of people have argued about that policy.
Right.
At some point we got to pick something about when you are legally an adult in the eyes of the state and in the eyes of the law. When you can be charged as an adult for crimes. We have to draw it somewhere. 18 seems fine. Now, if you really want to say this thing is unfair and it's some sort of injustice that 17-year-olds can't vote, then I would argue, Greg, let's have the 17-year-olds pay the kids' price at the movie theater. Or have the option of ordering off the kiddie menu. Like, I can understand this argument of somewhere in puberty, you don't get the advantages of being a kid, but you're held to some sort of unfair standard of not allowed to enjoy the responsibilities of being an adult. But no, I don't believe that it's an injustice that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds are not voting. I don't, look, sometimes you got to wait to do stuff until you're older, kids. I've got two boys who are eager to get out and do all kinds of stuff in life. And I keep saying, no, you're not old enough. 18 is reasonable. I don't see any massive problem. And considering the state of the electorate as is, and how ill-informed they are, and how half of them can't recognize the vice president and things like that, I don't see the problem of, let's bring in the 17-year-olds. They're much more astute on these sorts of things.
Well, Jim, to me, there's a couple things that jump out at me. First of all, we keep pushing adulthood further and further into life for most things, right? It used to be not so long ago in this country, 50 years ago, most 18-year-olds instantly got a job and started taking care of themselves and very quickly a family. Now we've got people waiting 21, they're out of college. Wait, I'm not ready yet. Another 3 years of grad school, 24. I want to get my doctorate. And we keep pushing it back, and we keep pushing back when these kids, these 19-year-olds in college that are really adults yet, their frontal lobe hasn't developed. And we keep talking about how they're just not ready to really handle all the things in life now at 16, when these kids aren't even really finished getting rid of their acne and really can't think straight at all, we're going to let them do this. So what it shouts out to me is just a shameless way to try to get more Democrats, more Democrat votes, right? Because if you're not a liberal by the time you're 25, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 35, you don't have a brain. They're wanting to get the ones right now and get those votes. It's shameless.
Yeah, it looks pretty direct on this. There was, when we lowered the voting age to 18 back in the 60s, 70s, sorry, I got to look that up, but the gist being that there was a stronger argument of, wait a second, if I can get drafted into the military, but I still got to wait 3 more years to vote. All right, that's a fair objection.
I agree.
We should have some sort of uniform standard of when you are an adult, and this kind of leads to that question of, well, was it 21 to drink, and isn't rental cars you had to get up to
25 now?
I believe it was actually 87 for males. It was really, really high.
Yeah.
But this idea that okay, we should have some sort of standardization of when you are that, and you get all the responsibilities, you get all the privileges. Because once you do this, someone's going to argue, well, wait a second, the 15-year-olds are unfairly oppressed and all that kind of stuff. The only way I could see this eventually panning out, if this trend endlessly continues, Greg, is that eventually this conceivably could lead to prenatal voting, and maybe that would help the pro-life cause. I don't know.
Hey, anything we can do, because we know it's going the wrong way right now. Other Greg is me. I'm Greg Knapp. That was your third martini. Thanks so much for being with us again. My name is Greg Knapp, in for Greg Columbus. Jim Geraghty from National Review Online, always here. Thank you for joining us for the 3 Martini Lunch. We'll see you again tomorrow.